4 years, the story of Jenny Slatten and Sumit Singh has been a cornerstone of the Fiancé universe, a saga of forbidden love, cultural clashes, and a seemingly insurmountable wall of family disapproval. We watched them navigate catfishing, a secret first marriage, and the relentless, tearful opposition of Sumit's parents, Sadhna and Anil. But eventually, against all odds, they found their peace. They married, they settled into a quiet life in India, sharing sweet moments on social media, making us all believe that love had finally conquered all. We saw the smiles, the trips to the market, the life Jenny had dreamed of for a decade. It seemed the war was over. But we were wrong. It was just a ceasefire. And the next battle wasn't going to be fought with tearful arguments in the living room. It was going to be a cold, calculated act of war designed to tear them apart forever. It all started on a quiet Tuesday in October of. The day community was going about its day, scrolling through memes and arguing about the latest cast members, when a notification popped up. Jenny Slatten was live on Instagram. Those who clicked in were not greeted with the usual smiling face from her Indian kitchen. Instead, they saw a shaky, handheld video. Jenny's face was pale, streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a terror we had never seen before. Her hand trembled as she held up a piece of paper to the camera, a thick, official-looking document bearing the imposing emblem of the Indian government. Her voice, usually so full of life, was a broken whisper. "They're trying to kick me out," she sobbed, the words catching in her throat. "After all this time, after everything we've been through, they're sending me home. They're deporting me." The live feed cut out, leaving thousands of viewers in stunned silence. Within minutes, the internet exploded us. Save Jenny began trending worldwide. The initial wave of speculation was exactly what you'd expect. Her visa must have been denied. It's a common fear for any immigrant, and for Jenny, who had been on a long-term tourist visa for years, it seemed like a nightmare scenario that had finally come true. Fan theories swirled. Did she forget to file the renewal paperwork? Was there a new stricter law in place? Was her age finally becoming a bureaucratic issue? The narrative was one of a tragic but understandable government mix-up. But the truth was a poisonously guarded secret, a dark, premeditated conspiracy far more sinister than any of us could have ever imagined. If you want to understand the depths of the betrayal that was about to be uncovered, and I mean the whole, twisted, unbelievable story, then do me a favor right now. Hit that like button, and more importantly, subscribe to the tell-all tapes and turn on notifications. You are not going to want to miss a single second of where this is going. Now, let's get back to it. The official story that began to trickle out through gossip blogs and news snippets was that Jenny's long-term visa renewal had been denied due to insufficient financial documentation. It sounded plausible. We all know Jenny relies on her Social Security income from the United States. Perhaps the exchange rate, inflation, or a change in requirements had made her income fall below a new, invisible line. It was a sad story, a story of red tape and unfortunate circumstances, but that story was a lie. It was a carefully constructed smokescreen designed to hide an act of pure, unadulterated villainy. The first crack in that official narrative came from a place no one expected. An anonymous email was sent to a handful of prominent Fiancé content creators, myself included. The sender identified themselves only as a former legal clerk with ties to the Singh family's lawyer, a person who claimed to have a crisis of conscience. They said they could no longer stay silent, that what they had witnessed was a monstrous perversion of justice and family. They laid out a story so shocking, so diabolical, that it sounded like a plot from a thriller movie. This wasn't a simple visa denial. This was an active, high-level investigation triggered by a formal complaint filed with India's Ministry of Home Affairs, the highest authority on immigration. And the complainants? The people who had walked to that federal building and filed the paperwork to have Jenny Slatten investigated, deported, and permanently banned from the country she called home? It was none other than Sumit's own parents, Sadhna and Anil. But they didn't just complain. That's what makes this so horrifying. This wasn't an emotional outburst. According to the leak, this was a meticulously planned, months-long criminal plot. Sadhna and Anil, seeing that their emotional pleas and ultimatums had failed to break up Sumit and Jenny, decided to escalate their campaign from one of emotional warfare to one of legal destruction. Our source claims they pooled their resources and hired a fixer, a shadowy figure who specializes in navigating and often manipulating India's complex bureaucracy. Their goal was simple and ruthless: to build a fraudulent case against Jenny, a dossier of lies so convincing that the Indian government would have no choice but to not only deny her visa, but to brand her as a fraudulent applicant, a criminal, and throw her out of the country forever. Let's break down the sheer evil of what this dossier allegedly contained. The first pillar of their attack was financial. They knew Jenny's finances were a sensitive point. So, the fixer was tasked with creating a series of forged bank statements. These weren't crude photocopies, we're talking about sophisticated forgeries. They allegedly obtained copies of her real statements and used them as templates, digitally manipulating the numbers with painstaking detail. Every deposit from her U.S. Social Security was erased. Legitimate transfers were altered to look like suspicious, undocumented cash movements. The final product was a financial portrait of a woman with virtually legitimate personal income, a person who was, in the eyes of the state, a complete and total financial burden on her husband, Sumit, and by extension, a potential drain on the Indian state itself. They were painting her as a freeloader, a user, someone who brought nothing of value to the country. It was a direct assault on her independence and her contribution to her own household, a way of legally validating their long-held personal belief that she was simply using their son. But they didn't stop there. Financial fraud was just the beginning. The second part of their plan was to assassinate her character. They needed to portray her not just as a financial burden but as a social one, a corrupting influence on their community. The fixer was allegedly paid to canvass the neighborhood, not to gather real opinions, but to buy fake ones. They created a series of fabricated neighbor testimonials. These were formal, signed affidavits from people who lived near Jenny and Sumit. Our source claims that many of these people were paid off, while others were pressured, told that they were signing a simple community petition. The contents of these sworn statements were pure fiction, crafted to paint Jenny in the worst possible light. One affidavit, supposedly from a shopkeeper down the street, claimed Jenny was frequently argumentative, demanding special treatment and showing disrespect for local business owners. Another, from a family living next door, alleged that Jenny and Sumit hosted loud, disruptive parties late into the night, playing Western rock music and creating a disturbance that was entirely out of character with the quiet, residential area. They were trying to build a case that she was a public nuisance. The most poisonous of these testimonials, however, was a statement that accused Jenny of being disrespectful to local customs and traditions. It claimed she wore inappropriate clothing, refused to participate in community festivals, and generally acted with an air of American superiority. It was a complete fabrication. We have all seen Jenny on the show and on social media, embracing Indian culture with an open heart, wearing traditional clothes, and participating in religious ceremonies. This was a lie designed to stoke xenophobic fears, to paint her as an outsider who refused to assimilate, a cultural infection in their peaceful neighborhood. It was a cruel, calculated attempt to turn her own community against her, using a foundation of pure lies. Think about the psychology behind this. Sadhna and Anil weren't just trying to get her visa denied. They were trying to retroactively prove that they were right about her all along. They were creating a permanent legal record that defined Jenny Slatten by their own prejudices. It was a way of telling the world, and more importantly, telling Sumit, "See, we told you she was no good. Now the government agrees with us." It was an act of profound gaslighting, using the power and authority of the Indian state as their weapon. But the final piece of their conspiracy, the ultimate betrayal, was the most personal and disgusting of all. It was a direct, cruel, and unforgivable attack on Jenny's age and her health. The dossier contained a forged medical report. This document was designed to look like an official record from a prestigious clinic in New Delhi. It was a work of art in a criminal sense. It had the proper letterhead, official-looking stamps, and even a forged signature of a real doctor. The report stated in cold clinical terms that Jenny Slatten was suffering from a chronic, degenerative, and expensive medical condition. The source didn't specify the exact illness, but said it was described as something that would require ongoing, costly treatment and would likely render her incapacitated in the near future. The report went on to falsely claim that she had failed to disclose this pre-existing condition to immigration authorities during her previous visa applications. A serious offense in its own right, this single document was a masterstroke of cruelty. It accomplished three things at once. First, it made her a potential public health burden, a major red flag for any immigration system in the world. Second, it painted her as dishonest, a liar who had actively concealed critical information from the government. Third, and most cruelly, it was a direct weaponization of her age. Sadhna's most consistent complaint about Jenny was that she was too old for Sumit. This forged document was their way of saying, she's not just old, she's sick, she's falling apart, and she's going to cost you and our country everything. It was the ultimate expression of their prejudice, laundered through the language of a medical diagnosis. So let's be perfectly clear about the goal here. This intricate web of lies, the fake bank statements, the paid-off neighbors, the fraudulent medical report, wasn't just designed to get a simple denied stamp on her visa renewal. The goal was far more permanent and destructive. The plan was to get Jenny flagged as a fraudulent applicant of the highest order. A denial is temporary, you can often reapply, but a finding of fraud, of intentionally deceiving the government with forged documents carries catastrophic consequences. It would result in immediate deportation proceedings. Not a gentle please leave within days. We're talking about government agents potentially showing up at her door, and even worse, it would come with a permanent, lifetime ban from re-entering India. This was their endgame. To physically and legally sever Jenny from India, and therefore from Sumit, forever. There would be no more appeals, no more extensions, no more hope. If their plan succeeded, Jenny would be put on a plane back to America, and the door to the life she had built with the man she loved would be slammed shut and locked for all time. They weren't just trying to end a relationship, they were trying to erase it from existence within the borders of their country. The complaint was filed, the dossier was submitted, and the wheels of bureaucracy began to turn. The Ministry of Home Affairs, presented with what appeared to be a mountain of credible, damning evidence, did exactly what Sodano and Anil had hoped. They launched a formal investigation into Jenny Slatten. Her visa renewal was put on indefinite hold and the deportation order was issued pending the outcome of the investigation. The official document she held up in her tearful Instagram live was not a simple denial letter. It was a notice of deportation. The first devastating success of her in-laws' criminal plot. The initial days were a blur of panic and confusion for Jenny and Sumit. They had no idea about the conspiracy. All they knew was that the government was trying to kick her out based on vague accusations of financial and personal misconduct. Sumit was frantic, making calls, trying to understand what was happening, while Jenny fell into a deep depression, convinced that her worst fears had come true, that her time in India was over. It was in this moment of utter despair that Sumit, refusing to give up, made the decision that would change everything. He knew they couldn't fight this alone. They were up against the full power of the Indian government. He scraped together their savings and hired a high-powered, aggressive immigration lawyer in New Delhi, one known for taking on impossible cases. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Sharma, listened patiently as Sumit and Jenny explained their situation. She reviewed the deportation order and the list of official reasons. Her initial assessment was grim. The government's case on paper looked strong, but something didn't sit right with her. The sheer volume and variety of the negative evidence seemed unnatural. It was too perfect, too comprehensive. It felt less like a routine background check and more like a targeted character assassination. She decided to start digging, not into Jenny's life, but into the origin of the complaint itself. And that's when the first thread of the conspiracy began to unravel. Under Indian law, they were able to petition for access to the file that had triggered the investigation. After weeks of legal wrangling, the ministry was compelled to provide them with a redacted version of the initial complaint. And there, in black and white, were the names of the complainants, Sadhna Singh and Anil Singh. Imagine that moment. Imagine Sumit sitting in a lawyer's office, seeing his own parents' names on a document designed to destroy his marriage and deport his wife. The betrayal must have been a physical blow. All the years of arguments, tears, and disapproval suddenly paled in comparison to this. was not disapproval. This was a declaration of war. It was the moment Sumit finally, and irrevocably, had to choose. And he chose Jenny. Any lingering loyalty, any hope for reconciliation with his parents, died in that office. He looked at his lawyer, his face hardened with a new kind of resolve, and said, "They will not get away with this. We fight back. Not just the deportation, we sue them. We sue them for everything." And so, the battle lines were drawn. This was no longer just an immigration case. It was a war on fronts. First, they had to fight the deportation order and prove to the government that the evidence against Jenny was a pack of lies. Second, they filed a massive criminal and civil lawsuit against Sadhna and Anil Singh. The lawsuit was a bombshell, alleging a litany of offences that went far beyond typical family drama. The key allegations were explosive. First, conspiracy and forgery. The suit alleged that Sadhna and Anil had knowingly and with malicious intent conspired to create and submit falsified documents to a federal agency. This is a serious crime in India, as it is anywhere. They weren't just lying. They were subverting the very legal systems of the country. The lawsuit named them as the architects of the plot, the ones who had initiated and funded the entire operation. Second, defamation of character. The suit meticulously detailed how the forged testimonials and the fake medical report were designed to maliciously spread lies to damage Jenny's reputation, not just with the government but within her own community. It argued that these lies had caused her severe emotional distress and made her a target of suspicion and gossip in the place she called home. They were seeking substantial damages for the harm done to her good name. And third, a unique civil claim attempted marital sabotage. Ms. Sharma, their lawyer, argued brilliantly that their actions constituted a direct and unlawful attempt to terminate a legally recognized marriage through fraudulent means. She argued that since they could not convince Sumit to leave his wife, they had resorted to a criminal conspiracy to have the state do it for them. It was a novel legal argument, but one that perfectly captured the essence of their vindictive plot. The lawsuit sent shockwaves through their extended family and community. Sadhna and Anil, who had always portrayed themselves as victims, as devout parents trying to save their son from a terrible mistake, were now facing the public shame of being branded as criminals. They hired their own lawyer and prepared to fight, confident that their paper trail was clean, that the fixer had covered their tracks, and that it would be impossible to prove their involvement. They believed their plan was foolproof. They had underestimated Jenny's and Sumit's resolve, and they had massively underestimated the skills of their new lawyer. Ms. Sharma's legal team immediately got to work, and their first target was the dossier itself. They didn't just want to claim the documents were fake. They needed to prove it, beyond a shadow of a doubt. The investigation began with the most audacious piece of evidence, the forged medical report. They contacted the clinic and the doctor whose name was on the document. The doctor, a respected physician, was horrified. He confirmed immediately that he had never had a patient named Jenny Slatten, that the signature was a forgery, and that the medical record number on the report did not exist in their system. That was the first domino to fall. The clinic, furious at the fraudulent use of their name and reputation, eagerly agreed to cooperate fully with the investigation and provide a sworn affidavit to that effect. Next, the financial documents. This was more complex. The forgeries were good, but they weren't perfect. Ms. Sharma hired a forensic accounting firm. These experts analyzed the digital files of the forged statements that the government had on record. They found telltale signs of digital manipulation, microscopic inconsistencies in font kerning, pixel-level artifacts around the numbers that had been altered. They were able to create a detailed report showing exactly how Jenny's real income had been digitally erased and replaced with zeros. They proved, scientifically, that the documents were fraudulent, but proving the documents were fake was only half the battle. They had to connect the forgeries directly back to Sadhna and Anil. This is where the case could have stalled, a classic, he said, she said. But, the fixer, in his arrogance, had made a mistake, a digital mistake, and it would be the smoking gun that blew the entire conspiracy wide open. Jenny's lawyer filed a subpoena for the internet records of not just Sadhna and Anil but their entire immediate family, including Sumit's brother, Amit, and his wife. They were looking for a needle in a digital haystack. And they found it. The legal team's cybersecurity expert traced the digital file of the forged medical report. They discovered that the final version of the PDF had been created on a specific computer at a specific time. And the IP address of that computer, the unique digital fingerprint of its location, didn't belong to some shadowy fixer in a back alley. It belonged to the home of Sumit's brother-in-law, the husband of his sister. It turned out the family, in a fit of cheapness and arrogance, hadn't used a professional criminal. They had enlisted the brother-in-law, a man with some graphic design skills, to create the most damning document in their arsenal. He had created the fake medical report on his home laptop. He was the one who had copied the clinic's logo, forged the doctor's signature, and typed out the litany of lies about Jenny's health. He had thought he was clever, but he had left a digital trail that led directly back to the family's inner circle. This was the breakthrough they needed. Faced with irrefutable evidence of his involvement, the brother-in-law's confidence shattered. Under the threat of serious criminal charges for forgery and conspiracy, his loyalty to Sadhna and Anil evaporated. He confessed everything. He told the investigators that yes, he had created the document, but he had done so at the direct request and under immense pressure from Anil and Sadhna. He described the meetings, the instructions, the exact words they had used. He laid out the entire plot from his perspective, and he gave them something more, something that would seal his parents-in-law's fate. He told them about the phone calls, specifically a recorded phone call. He revealed that Anil, paranoid about the paid-off neighbors getting their stories wrong, had coached one of them over the phone, reading from a script of lies he wanted in the affidavit. The brother-in-law had a copy of the recording, and he was now willing to hand it over in exchange for a plea deal. The recording was played in a preliminary hearing. The audio was crystal clear. It was Anil Singh's voice, unmistakable. He could be heard patiently, methodically, telling a man what to write in his testimonial against Jenny. Just say that you see her being disrespectful to the elders, Anil's voice instructed. Write that she plays loud music. Mention that she tries to act like she is young. Make it sound like it comes from you. This is very important for Sumit's future. It was the final, undeniable proof. A smoking gun in the form of a sound wave. They had him. They had them all. The perfect airtight conspiracy had unraveled completely, brought down by a combination of digital forensics, old-fashioned detective work, and the panicked confession of a co-conspirator. The path to justice was now clear, and the stage was set for a courtroom showdown that would finally bring the truth to light. The fight for Jenny's right to stay in India was about to reach its dramatic and, for Sadhna and Anil, its devastating conclusion. The legal battle that followed was nothing short of epic. This wasn't a family squabble playing out on television anymore. This was a high-stakes criminal and civil trial in the Indian court system. The courtroom itself was an imposing chamber, all dark wood and high ceilings, a place where the weight of justice felt tangible. On one side sat Jenny and Sumit, a united front, their faces a mixture of anxiety and determination. On the other side sat Sadhna and Anil, looking smaller and older than ever, their usual air of defiant righteousness replaced by a simmering, resentful fear. They had wanted to fight this battle in the shadows, using anonymous complaints and forged documents. Now, their actions were being dragged into the harsh, unforgiving light of a public courtroom. Ms. Sharma, Jenny's lawyer, was a force of nature. She began her opening statement by laying out the case not as a family dispute but as a calculated criminal enterprise. This is a case, she began, her voice ringing with authority, about a conspiracy born of prejudice and executed with malice. It is about the weaponization of our nation's laws to achieve a cruel and personal vendetta. We will prove beyond any doubt that the defendants, Sadhna and Anil Singh, orchestrated a campaign of lies and forgery to have their own son's wife, a woman who has made India her home, illegally deported and permanently banished. She began by dismantling the dossier, piece by poisonous piece. First, the medical report. She called the esteemed Dr. from the New Delhi clinic to the stand. He was an older, distinguished man and his anger was palpable. He testified under oath that the document was a complete and utter fabrication. He explained to the judge how his signature had been clumsily forged, how the clinic's letterhead had been poorly replicated. To use a medical diagnosis, a tool for healing, as a weapon to harm someone is a profound ethical violation, he stated, looking directly at Sadhna and Anil. The conditions listed here are designed to create fear and suggest dependency. It is not a medical report. It is a work of malicious fiction. The judge listened intently, his expression growing more severe with every word. Next came the forensic accountant. He presented a slideshow that broke down, in excruciating detail, how Jenny's bank statements had been digitally altered. He showed the court the before and after images, pointing out the pixel-level evidence of tampering. He explained that the deposits from Jenny's U.S. Social Security, which were regular and consistent, had been skillfully erased, creating the illusion of income. It was a methodical, almost surgical presentation that proved the financial case against Jenny was built on a deliberate technological lie. Sumit watched his parents during this testimony. They refused to look at the screen, staring straight ahead, their faces like stone. Then, Ms. Sharma turned her attention to the character assassination. The so-called neighbor testimonials. She called one of the signatories to the stand, a middle-aged woman who lived doors down from Jenny and Sumit. The woman was visibly terrified. On direct examination by the defense, she repeated the lies from her affidavit, that Jenny was loud, disruptive, disrespectful. But under Ms. Sharma's cross-examination, her story began to fall apart. Ms. Sharma questioned her on specific dates and times of these alleged loud parties. The woman couldn't provide any. She was asked to describe Jenny's inappropriate clothing. She mumbled vague descriptions that contradicted photos from Jenny's own social media. Finally, Ms. Sharma lowered her voice and asked a simple question. Were you paid for your signature on this document? The woman froze. She looked over at Sadhna and Anil, her eyes wide with panic. Their lawyer shot to his feet, shouting, "Objection!" But the judge overruled him. "Answer the question," the judge commanded. The woman broke down, sobbing on the stand. "Yes," she whispered. "Anil ji, he came to my house. He said Jenny was a bad influence on the neighborhood. He said it was our duty to protect our community. He gave me rupees. He said it was a gift for my trouble, for signing the paper. I didn't know it would be used like this. I am so sorry." A gasp went through the courtroom. It was a stunning moment of live, unscripted drama. One lie had been exposed, and it cast a shadow of doubt over all the other testimonials. The prosecution's case was building into an undeniable mountain of evidence, but the final, crushing blow came with the testimony of Sumit's brother-in-law. As part of his plea agreement, he took the stand to testify against his own family. He looked pale and ashamed, avoiding the furious glare of Anil. He recounted step by step how his father-in-law had approached him with the plan. He described Anil's obsession, his constant ranting about how Jenny was ruining their family name and stealing their son. He confessed to creating the fake medical report on his laptop, using a graphic design program. He detailed how Sadhna herself had coached him on what ailments to include, suggesting things that would emphasize Jenny's age and perceived fragility. He was painting a portrait of a conspiracy that was not just Anil's doing but a joint effort, a sick passion project for the couple. And then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Ms. Sharma asked for the courtroom to be silenced, and she played the recorded phone call. The sound of Anil Singh's voice filled the room, cold and clear, coaching the neighbor on what lies to write. "Make it sound like it comes from you. This is very important for Sumit's future." As the recording played, Sumit closed his eyes, his face a mask of pain. Jenny reached over and squeezed his hand, her own tears falling silently. Anil himself turned a ghastly shade of grey, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. Sadhna just stared at her son, her expression not one of remorse but of deep, burning anger, as if this was all his fault. The recording ended, leaving a profound, damning silence in its wake. This was the smoking gun, and it had just been fired in the center of the courtroom for all to see. The defense was a pathetic, desperate affair. Their lawyer attempted to paint Sodonor and Anil as simple, loving parents who were driven to extreme measures out of concern for their son. He argued that they were not sophisticated criminals, but that they had been manipulated by the fixer, who had taken their concerns and twisted them into this illegal plot. They tried to claim that they never intended to forge documents, only to highlight their concerns to the authorities. It was a flimsy, unbelievable defense that crumbled under the weight of the evidence, especially the recorded phone call in Anil's own voice. Then it was time for the principals to testify. Sumit took the stand, a moment of almost unbearable tension. He had to testify against his own mother and father. His voice was thick with emotion but steady. He spoke of his love for Jenny, of the life they had built together. He then recounted the years of emotional torment his parents had subjected them to. Ms. Sharma asked him about the moment he discovered his parents were behind the deportation complaint. It was, Sumit said, pausing to compose himself, the greatest betrayal of my life, my own parents. They tried to use the law to destroy my marriage because they could not destroy it with their words. They chose their prejudice over their son's happiness. And in that moment, I knew that the relationship I thought I had with them was a lie. He looked directly at his parents. I love them because they are my parents, but I do not respect what they have done. What they did was not love. It was hateful. Finally, Jenny took the stand. She looked directly at the judge, her voice shaking but clear. She spoke not just of the legalities but of the human cost of the conspiracy. 4 years, she said, I have tried to win their approval. I have learned the culture, I have respected their traditions, I have loved their son with all my heart. I left my home, my family, my country to build a life here. India is my home now. And they tried to take that from me. They attacked my finances, they attacked my character. They attacked my health, they used my age, the number of years I have lived, as a weapon against me, as if a long life is a crime. She then held up the deportation notice. When I received this paper, she continued, her voice cracking, I thought my world was over. The fear of being ripped away from my husband, from my home, from the life I have known for so long. It's a terror I cannot describe. To find out that this terror was manufactured, that it was a deliberate, cruel plot by my own family. It is a wound that I don't know will ever heal. All I ever wanted was to live in peace with the man I love. I am asking the court to give me that peace. To declare that I have a right to be here and to hold the people who tried to unlawfully take that right away from me accountable for their actions. She finished her testimony and the courtroom was silent. Her words so full of raw, honest pain had hung in the air, a final, powerful indictment of Sadhna and Anil's cruelty. There was nothing more to be said. The lawyers gave their closing arguments, and the judge retired to consider his verdict. The day of the ruling arrived, the courtroom was packed. The judge entered, and a hush fell over the room. He began by addressing the deportation order. The complaint filed with the Ministry of Home Affairs against Jennifer Slatten has been found to be based on fraudulent evidence and malicious intent. The investigation is terminated. The deportation order is hereby vacated. Furthermore, this court recommends that Ms. Slatten's application for permanent residency be expedited and approved without delay as a measure of restorative justice. A wave of relief washed over Jenny and Sumit. Jenny burst into tears, this time of joy, burying her face in Sumit's shoulder. The first and most important battle had been won. She was staying, she was home, but the judge was not finished. He then turned to the civil lawsuit. In the matter of the civil claims of defamation and attempted marital sabotage, he announced, his voice like thunder, this court finds overwhelmingly in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Slatten. The actions of the defendants, Sadhna and Anil Singh, were not those of concerned parents. They were a monstrous and calculated attack born of prejudice. They engage in a criminal conspiracy that caused profound emotional distress and reputational damage. Therefore, this court awards the plaintiff, Jenny Slatten, the sum of American dollars to be paid in full by the defendants as compensation for the damages they have inflicted. The amount was staggering. It was a clear and powerful message that their actions had severe, tangible consequences. Finally, The judge addressed the criminal charges. In the matter of conspiracy and forgery, he said, looking directly at Sodonor and Anil, "You are both guilty. The evidence is irrefutable." Sumit held his breath. This was the moment his parents could be sent to jail. The judge continued, "However, this court has received a plea for mercy from your son, Sumit Singh. He has asked that his parents, due to their age and his desire not to see them imprisoned, be spared jail time." The judge paused, letting the weight of Sumit's mercy sink in. "Considering this plea and your age, I will be lenient in one aspect only. You will not be sentenced to incarceration. However, you are hereby sentenced to 2 years of strict probation. You will be fined a substantial amount for your crimes. And you will be compelled by this court to issue a formal, public apology to Ms. Jenny Slatten for your actions." He then handed down more severe penalties for the brother-in-law and the fixer, including suspended jail sentences and heavier fines, making it clear who the true architects of the plot were. The aftermath was as surreal as the trial itself. A week later, as mandated by the court, Sodonor and Anil stood before a small group of reporters and read a prepared statement. Their faces were grim, their voices monotone. "We, Sadan and Anil Singh, formally apologize to our daughter-in-law, Jenny Slatten, for the pain and distress our actions have caused her. We submitted false information to the government. Our actions were wrong. It was a hollow, forced apology, devoid of any real remorse. But it was a public humiliation nonetheless. They had been exposed, judged, and punished." Jenny and Sumit watched the broadcast from their home. They felt no triumph, only a sad, quiet sense of closure. The financial judgment forced Sodonor and Anil to sell a significant portion of their assets, including a second property they owned. The financial blow was immense, a constant reminder of their failed conspiracy. The family was shattered. Sumit, while he had saved them from prison, made it clear that forgiveness was not on the table. The trust was gone, pulverized by their actions. The relationship was reduced to a few stilted, necessary phone calls. The warm, bustling family life Sumit had once known was gone, replaced by a cold, formal distance. He had chosen his wife and in doing so, had lost his parents. But in that loss, he and Jenny found a new kind of freedom. The threat that had loomed over their entire relationship for a decade was finally, legally, and permanently gone. They were no longer waiting for approval or bracing for the next attack. Jenny's permanent residency came through, a solid official document that declared India was her home, no questions asked. They were free to live their lives on their own terms, their love for each other vindicated and fortified by the fire they had walked through together. Jenny Slatten was no longer just a visitor in India, or a wife tolerated on a visa. She was a resident, a victor, the hero of her own story who had fought a criminal conspiracy and won. She had not only saved her marriage but had secured her right to exist in the life she had chosen. The war, at long last, was truly over. And this brings us back to the core of it all. The family drama we watched on TV became a real-life criminal thriller, with stakes higher than any of us ever imagined. Sadhna and Anil crossed a line from which there was no return. They didn't just disapprove, they conspired. They didn't just argue, they committed federal crimes. Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Sumit pleaded for them to stay out of jail, a final act of a son's duty. But after they tried to have his wife deported, to tear his life apart with such cold, calculated malice, can he ever truly forgive them? Is there a path back from a betrayal this deep? Or is the damage so profound that the family is broken forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear what you think. And if you found this deep dive as shocking as I did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the Tell All Tapes. You never know what secrets we'll uncover next.